In March of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic brought live music to a halt. Around the world, bands and musicians were suddenly unable to be together or play together. It was during those strange early days of lockdown that Wavelength hatched the Band Together project to research and explore remote musical collaboration. Playing live over the internet. Yes, it is possible, but there are limitations, mostly related to digital latency, the time delay of audio signals. Over the course of 2 years, Wavelength brought together a team of musicians, curators, and audio experts to take part in a series of online workshops and discussions. The core team collaborated with other musicians to test out a slate of software and hardware platforms. Each of these platforms was then assessed through a defined series of attributes. The result is something of a consumer guide to remote musical collaboration. The pandemic may have subsided, but we still see plenty of applications for this technology. Let's see what our team came up with.
One of the most amazing things about SyncSpace was that it was possible to engage in remote musical collaboration. I remember the first thing we did was count together and just count to 4 and continuously, in a loop.
It's in the name, right? Like SyncSpace, but it's just great to be able to jam in real time and not even have to worry about, oh shoot, a little delay here, a little delay here. Am I at 128 or 64 samples? Like that wasn't a stress. You just set it and forget it, and getting on the server, things like that. Like that wasn't an issue.
The SyncSpace website and what Adrian has done there was very supportive in the process. Even before getting an account, just sort of talking about the ins and outs of what remote musical collaboration takes. Not only was it a good resource that helped this process of setting up, but when we did run into issues, Adrian from SyncSpace was extremely responsive in a timely and caring manner, which was so supportive throughout the process.
Yeah. Again, speaking to how detailed the website is, or even just as far as explaining every little detail down to the internet connection. The learning curve almost felt invisible for me just because every single step of the way I was led.
The audio and video quality, I've actually been surprised at how good it is when our connection is strong. You're only able to have 2 inputs and 2 outputs. So when you are thinking about collaborating remotely through SyncSpace, it's important to consider how you're going to use those 2 inputs for what you want to present. And there's different audio interfaces that can support that process. Even if you don't have an audio interface, you can use it with your built-in inputs and outputs, which is also good to know.
And even just having the one mic available for a room mic has been working for us as well.
Yeah.
But it sounds great.
One thing that I have noticed is the more regularly that I'm on it, you start figuring out how to tweak a few things along the way when it comes to audio quality in particular. It's not just for SyncSpace, but I think it may be a larger kind of remote musical collaboration direction, just to continuously think about what accessibility looks like for as wide a group of people and musicians and artists as possible. We're both sitting in Toronto, where internet connectivity is available to us. Some of these issues in terms of accessibility are not on the individual, but on the larger systems that we're a part of and rely upon to stay connected. I think the beauty of RMC is that if it works for musicians, it can pretty much work for so many other applications and processes when it comes to collaboration.
We both are in different situations where we're not always able to meet up in person anyways, and being able to create like this, even as we prepare, it's just we're making magic, man, and that's something that to be able to do virtually is insane, and I personally don't want to stop doing that, so I'm definitely going to continue to use this.
So
So the idea with ThinkSpace is to create a next level experience for musicians to perform together on the internet, where they can not only say rehearse, but they can actually perform in a live concert and also have a live studio online at the same time, helping them with the broadcast and actually broadcasting the whole thing, the whole performance to a live audience. When the pandemic hit, like a lot of musicians, I found I was restricted in what I could do in terms of performing to audiences. So like a lot of musicians, I started to do things online, and that initially really meant that I had to do things by myself. Now I'm very fortunate that I happen to live with another musician. My wife is a musician, so we were at least able to perform together, and we were able to live stream that out. But still, it was just the two of us. And for many other musicians, they could only perform, by themselves or possibly with some kind of a pre-recorded track. So I wondered about the possibility of being able to perform together and interact and collaborate online through the internet. There are many challenges to what I described. So the first one, the most sort of obvious one, is that when you try to perform music together in real time across the internet, that there is some latency, some delay between the time that you send your sound out and someone else on the other end hears it. That latency can sometimes be enough that it would make it difficult or impossible or very uncomfortable to try to play music together. The other challenge that we had is that you're trying to perform, and at the same time, you're trying to muck with all this technology, all this computer stuff and audio gear and everything else. When you perform in a room, often at a venue, there is someone there, an engineer, or a sound engineer, or someone operating cameras or other things, who is able to help you with all this stuff. So I wanted to have an experience where the musicians could basically have someone there throughout the performance who would be able to help them out and support them. The pandemic was really, when we were very restricted and we had to socially distance, we used the platform to put on lots of, literally hundreds of live performances. Moving forward now, even though we're able to play together in person, there are still a lot of opportunities to use the technology for various things. For one, you can use it to rehearse. You can use it to rehearse and not have to deal with traveling and packing up all your gear and tearing down all your gear and all that other stuff. You can collaborate with people at a distance where otherwise it would be hard, difficult or expensive, right? Or possibly, impossible to make it happen. We did a lot of things even during the pandemic where we had musicians collaborating who otherwise would never even have collaborated. So we have we did many concerts with musicians who they still haven't even met. The other thing that's since happened, and although initially ThinkSpace started off being all about performing and rehearsing, it's now a fair bit of it is about teaching. So we have music teachers, musicians who teach online, and they want to provide the best possible experience for them and their students. So that's another thing that we're really focusing on moving forward.
I think my first impression of Petal is how simple it is. It's literally just the red box that pops up on your screen, and there's like maybe 2 or 3 things you can do on there. But other than that, you're really working in your own DAW on your device. And that was my first impression. It's just very straightforward. I think something I really appreciate with Petal is that your output, like what you're creating, is just dependent on your understanding of your own DAW, because you don't have to really learn a whole new system in order to create with Petal. You're using softwares that you already understand and have access to. You don't have to go through that learning curve of adding this new tool to your creative process. It's really just there to make things easier and allow you to collaborate. I really liked that they had the video functionality built into Petal. So other times with other platforms, I had a Zoom meeting going so I could see my collaborator and we could talk. I will say that our programs crashed a couple times, and it wasn't detrimental. Like, everything always auto-saved. It didn't change our output, but it is something to be aware of. Maybe it depends on the kind of program you're using, the device that it's all running on. But for us, we found that with our laptops that we use all the time for other music things, there was a bit of crashing. So that's something to keep in mind. If your program doesn't autosave, make sure you're saving as you go. The main function of Petal is transferring files and recording audio. And I do want to say that the file transfer was so seamless, like it was so quick. And both of us were really blown away when we started to play around with that function. So I just wanted to shout that out.
When I started working with these softwares was actually a little bit before the pandemic. So I was lucky to have researched them a little bit. So once we started working with different programs we had, Jam Studio, which is actually jamstud.io, was one of them. I enjoyed it, as most of them did. There were always some issues depending on how fast the internet was for other people. But for the most part, the fact that you could do video and audio and jam with other people and collaborate in that sense was definitely appreciated. Yeah, it was definitely user-friendly, even more so if you are not really that concerned about using the quality for it for actually, in a song that's going to be released. For collaborating and jamming or rehearsing or even writing together, this program was awesome for that. The quality is definitely usable. Again, it depends on what tolerance level you have for quality. In my case, I would do a lot of live streaming, and also I'm a recording engineer, so I would say it's not adequate for final release. But if it's for something that's maybe for a live stream, or as I said before, for writing, songwriting, and collaborating and jamming and rehearsing, it's definitely more than fine. The fact that you could have a private chat that is seen only by the people that are participating in the session was definitely helpful. Because sometimes when you're doing a live stream or some sort of collaboration where there's an audience present, you can use phones and you can use other things, but it was good to be able to collaborate like that and to communicate like that. But also the fact that there's rooms that are open. So if you weren't necessarily going to write with someone in mind and you just wanted to connect your guitar or vocals or drums or whatever, there's communities or different groups that are already open where you can just join. And I found most of the people within the community were really open-minded, and they were helpful, and it was a good vibe overall.
I gotta be honest with you. Our experience using Soundjack wasn't the best, and we didn't get very far. We sort of wrestled with it for a while, over a few different days. We were able to get it working, but we never really got to the point where we were truly able to collaborate with each other. It was easy to install and get up and running and get it working with my own system, like my own audio card. But when it came time to connect with my collaborator online, that's when things got a little dicey. We couldn't get, the DAWs working back and forth with each other with Soundjack. So if you just wanted to put a microphone in the room and jam with each other, you could do that, and the latency was fine if you're just sort of doing loose kind of things, playing guitar, singing along with each other. If one person was doing something rhythmic and the other person was singing, it was okay. But as soon as you wanted to do any kind of click track or tempo lock, any kind of thing like that, then it really fell apart really quickly. It wasn't like I could get my VST instrument running on my end and they could get it going on their end. We could hear each other's instruments and then jam. We couldn't even get those things to talk to each other at all. So even before the rhythmic problem of falling in and out, not being in sync with each other because we're both, listening to a different MIDI clock, we couldn't even hear the actual VSTs at all. So it kind of fell apart pretty quickly for us. I'd say the one thing that, Soundjack did make pretty easy was finding your collaborator. Big button add player, that kind of made it easy to find each other and add them.
BandLab is really interesting. I made a beat or like a mashup with a friend of mine, and I found it really easy to work with as someone that's not always using DAWs. I know my way around them, but I'm not really producing music all the time or anything like that. So I thought it was a really kind of comfortable space for me to play around and work on things. I really enjoyed it. I think it's great for beginners. I really appreciated the simplicity of this DAW. It's a lot less intimidating than, say, like Ableton or Logic, where there's so many things that you can do. And I feel like BandLab gives you the basic functions to produce something and play around with a drum kit and that kind of stuff. So I think the learning curve is not so bad with this one. Also, in terms of accessibility, it's like browser based. So you don't download a new program or anything like that. I really enjoy the simplicity of BandLab, but I will say that there were a couple things that I wish were a little bit different. So we noticed that the drum kit, you can't add your own sounds. You're limited to what they give you, which for beginners is totally cool. But then if you're working with someone that's used to like using their own sounds and kind of components, then those kind of things, I would say, impact the output and what you can create. You can invite up to 50 collaborators. So if you have a band, this is great. Or I think they also use this for like classrooms as well, which feels like the perfect use of a platform like this. And it also doubles almost like a social media platform in some ways, because you have the DAW and the work that you're doing in there, but there's another side of BandLab where everybody has a profile and you can post the music that you're creating, and you have the option to make your music forkable, which means that somebody else can look through your profile, find a track that you made that they really enjoy, and they can then put that into their own BandLab DAW and remix it and do different things with it. So it's another way that musicians can collaborate. I know when we were experimenting with different platforms, we talked about like bringing in somebody that you know and collaborating in that way. But there's also this whole other element of collaboration that can happen on BandLab just by posting your music on their platform that I really, I think is really exciting.
We've all been on quite a journey through the pandemic. While nothing can replace the feeling of making air molecules in the same room vibrate, many musicians have found that online collaboration has given them a new lease on life, connecting them to a whole world of potential collaborators. If you're ready to explore remote musical collaboration, there are plenty of tools out there to choose from. On behalf of Wavelength, thank you to our funders at the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategy Fund. Please visit wavelengthmusic.ca/bandtogether to download the full report. Let's see how this new online culture evolves.